Well, welcome back. Are we back? We're back. Hey, all right.
Yay,
Welcome
we're
back to
back.
Come Brew It. We've lost Mikey because he had to go home, he said, and wash his underwear.
Yes.
I don't know what happened. Somewhere in between, he got really excited, I guess. I'm not sure.
I don't really want to
go
know
home
what
and wash
happened.
my underwear.
What did you say? Mikey went to wash his underwear?
Yeah. And we don't need to know any more
I
than
mean,
that.
that's what he said when he left, so, yeah. Anyway,
Kind of shameful,
hopefully
really.
we covered enough about packaging and priming that it helps you get a little further what you're doing. Honestly, I'd like to say right now, if you do have some questions about something that's specific, email us, because somebody here is going to get back to you, and we can be more detailed in our response about why to do something or what's going to go on. It's just one of those things that there's so much to it that honestly you
can't cover it in 30 minutes, an hour, even 2 hours.
It's hard. We've done it before, so check out our previous episode on it. It was a while back that we did it. I mean, like pretty much an early episode, and I know that we covered a lot then. It's think about what you got going on and ask us a question. That's why we're here. So you have our email addresses as far as, our name at texasbrewinginc.com. And if anything, send it to info@texasbrewinginc.com and just ask us a question, and somebody's going to get back to you to give you an answer to our best ability, hopefully to fit what your problem is exactly.
Well, and one of the things that we really appreciate from you guys out there recently is because we've been getting a lot of feedback, and that really helps us, whether it be bad or good. It really helps us to know, because if we don't have any feedback, we're just going to keep doing the same shit over and over, even if you don't like it or not.
We're going to force it down your throat.
We're going to force. Whoa!
Take more of this crap.
Oh, okay. No. We're gonna offer the spoonful of sugar.
But I would say that we've gotten some great feedback recently, and that helps us to cover some issues or some topics that we may not have thought about covering, or even thought about addressing. So those are great ideas. Or if you have anything to comment, just please let us know, because I think that's one thing that really helps us keep the show going. And a lot of times we get emails and we're like, man, you know what? We didn't even think about covering that before. Right. So it's really good ideas to send us some information on some of the things that you may want to hear addressed or talked about, or hops or yeast or anything for that matter. And I mean, even tonight we have a beer from Johnny Red that brewed a beer with Red X, which, that's kind of a unique malt. A lot of people don't really know anything about it, and we're going to bust that out and talk about it a little bit, because I think it's really interesting.
I've been waiting to try this one,
and I've got it in my cooler over here, so we'll break that one out and talk about it a little bit. But I mean, a lot of people don't even think about brewing with a unique malt like that, Red X. So
right. So and here we go. Basically, what we want to start as a new segment here. Our next half is going to be what we're going to call our Malt-o-Rama, kind of like the Yeast-o-Rama and Hop-o-Rama. We're going to talk about different malts and whatnot that are available to you. Which typically you're coming in the 3 versions, more or less, of what's available to you malts, which is base malt, crystal malts, and then true specialty malts, right? And you find in each of those some variances as far as what they are, but like base malts across the board, more or less the same concept, but there's a lot of variance between brands. And then crystal malt, same thing. Where did it come from? To really tell you what's about it. And then, of course, there's the true specialty and adjunct version. And that one has a lot more to do with something more along the lines of, like, this is really adding some sort of character to it that you weren't going to get without that specific malt. So that's kind of what we're going to cover, and that's where the Red X and whatnot comes in.
Let's drink this beer and talk about it a little bit, because I think it's interesting.
Ooh, it's got a little pressure to it. I like it.
All right, so
we're starting with the Red X here. Stubby's pouring some for us right now.
This is something Johnny Red.
What kind of beer is this?
I think it's really kind of like a smash, because, I mean,
it's labeled as Red X Ale.
Here's the recipe.
Wait. Red XL, ESO5. See that color? not the asshole behind the glass, but two-headed guy over here. Look, two-headed guy. See, this is Johnny made this Red XL US05. It's 6.5 pounds. Best Malls Red X.
Yeah, it's the Red X.
3 pounds the RX Pilsen, half pound of wheat, and then ounce and a half of Hallertau at 60 and half ounce at 20. 6.5 gallons, 90-minute boil, RO water, a little bit of gypsum, and some calcium chloride.
So
original gravity 1050, final gravity.
Yeah, so this Red X is supposedly a base malt, which if you notice the color, it's really, really dark red color. I think this is a interesting malt. I've never really used this malt, but if you look at it, it's kind of a. I mean, there's no crystal malt in that to give it that amount of color. So
Jenny's been talking about this malt for every time I bring it up and ask him about it. He goes, there's this lady who orders it all the time. She says it gives this crazy nutty flavor, but won't give me the recipe.
Yeah. So this is a strange base malt, I would say, but to me,
right.
what I get from it is, and I think this is a really good recipe to use this malt with, because I think it's pretty simplified. There's not a whole lot of, it's just some noble hops in it, right?
Yeah.
And then you get just a little bit of Pilsner malt and the Red X for the majority of the base malt. And I have heard from people saying that the maltster, which is best from Germany, they actually say that you can use 100% of this in your malt bill. From what everybody I've talked to that has done that, they suggest not to do that. Maybe 65, 75% of this particular malt. So what do you get from this? Which I think is a unique malt for me when I taste this beer.
Well, when you look at it and you see the color and you know what flavor is coming across, I mean, you immediately think of a crystal malt. But I feel like there's not very
much sweetness at all, right?
There's not very much sweetness, and there's not a huge amount of actual caramel flavor.
There's no caramel to me.
But there is that sort of...
I get a biscuity.
Yeah, it's biscuity.
I was going with more
toasty.
of a wheat toast flavor.
Yeah. Like
almost
maybe it's
like
closer to Munich.
Yeah,
more than
maybe not a Cara Munich.
No.
Dark Munich, maybe the 20 Munich.
Maybe that. Maybe a Munich 20 might be something in that range, maybe. Because from what I understand, people talk about Munich 20 or Brees Munich 20 as kind of graham crackers.
Yeah,
maybe graham cracker a little bit.
It's got a little
graham
bit of
cracker without any of the
that's Cara Brown too. So
yeah,
the thing that I always find that comes with, say, like a red ale, and which is usually, not always done with caramel malts, but that, and this isn't like an off flavor or something. It's just the way I describe it. It's more of like a metallic, that sort of metallic taste that comes with that red character that usually.
You know what I kind of get from that? I would say almost
not a bad flavor.
One of the things that I do not like about the Weirmann melanoidin, I kind of get that in that kind of melanoidin flavor. You know what I mean? I kind of get that.
That irony, coppery.
Yeah, just that kind of
coppery.
I don't know. I don't like it. But
and it's not like, I wouldn't call it bad in any way. I think it comes with, it's one of the reasons I'm not a big fan of red ales unless they're more highly hopped with an American hop, because it sort of helps cover that. I like those combinations, but it's nice because it's smooth.
Yeah.
The flavor is very smooth. It doesn't linger on the palate.
Yeah.
And makes it hard to figure out what it tastes like.
You know what I would, this is the way I would describe it. It's somewhere in between a Victory and a biscuit malt. That's the flavor I get from that. What would you say?
I can see that.
Yeah. Victory's definitely there.
It's kind of a nutty, biscuity flavor to me.
I mean, those are very close together too, but it's like adding in some, like you said,
melanoid
kind of character. That's
it's not quite sweet, but
it's a little bit
malty flavor or something. I don't know.
Right, and
it's not like a light sweet, like a warm sweet flavor.
But I wouldn't even say that it's sweet because I don't know.
It's not terribly bready, and it's not
sweet like
not
a caramel
the
malt.
Belgian type of melanoidin or aromatic or something.
Sweet like
that,
buttermilk biscuits are sweet.
Yeah, it's biscuity.
Yeah.
Interesting though. I thought this was a great experiment, and I mean, this is something that I thought he did a great example of actually, featuring the malt to see kind of how it tastes, and because I think if you had done anything else, you hopped the shit out of it, and I don't think you would have been able to taste the malt. But
it's got a good toasted aroma.
Yeah,
too.
It does.
More so than I'm tasting.
I think that it would be paired well with instead of using more biscuit, using more of this with like a braggot. I think it would fare well.
Yeah. I think it would work with that.
Yeah, but we don't talk about meads around here, so I'm just kidding.
I'm sorry, I thought a braggot was a beer still.
Close.
Close to
Close enough.
Close to beer. It's still got half mead, so
okay. Well,
whatever.
I'll try and touch on that later at some other point when neither of you are here.
Hater.
I am a hater. Sorry.
Well, see, this is a very distinct malt, though, especially as far as the base malt goes. Is there do you have any details about like typically you see something like this quality coming out of it, it would be a specialty or a toasted or a roasted or what I mean. It wouldn't be considered a base malt.
Yeah, they actually consider it.
So like the diastatic power is up and it's got a lot of good fermentability, right? So I mean that's the main thing about this malt is that there's a good amount of fermentability.
I'm sure there's a good amount of fermentability, but I don't know if it is a I don't know if it has high diastatic power, but let me see if I can find this.
Because see, like to me, this reminds me of maybe a Munich on steroids or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It just really imparts a really darker color. I mean, I can't even think about that though. If it was 100% of this, it would just be overpowering.
Right. I mean, but think about how much color quality and flavor you get out of a Munich. If you're using a Munich against like a pale base malt, it can overpower it pretty fast. This feels like a big ass Munich.
Okay, so
in a way,
so I'm on the Best Malts website, and it says Best Malt Red X is a malt that has become synonymous with red tinted beers, as it can make. Oh wow, I think it's bad German translation.
A little bit.
As it can make at 100% of the grain bill. There is no need for any other malt, thanks to its exceptional process. Anyway, and optimal. This is it's like I think it's translated from German or something because it's really terrible.
Intense reddish hues. The malt was designed for a 12-degree P beer.
Plato.
12 Plato beer to retain the red color in stronger beers. Some best Pilsen malt should be added to the grain bill due to the higher wort gravity. But it says that Best Red X complies with the purity guidelines for German
Reinheitsgebot.
Thank you, because I wasn't going to try that word.
Yeah. So anyway, it says, let's see, it doesn't talk about the
max of 4.9 moisture content. I don't know what that means.
Yeah, but it really doesn't talk about the
don't worry too much
fermentability and stuff like that. Diastatic power.
WK200.
Yeah, I don't know what that means.
Either way,
it's
if you really want to, you know what? If anything, for Americans, this would make a fantastic base malt for a red IPA.
Yeah. I think it would.
It
actually.
would.
Yeah,
it would be great for that. I'd like to find out what we could do with something that's
I think
a little less
work.
timid in the hop category, and then something that's maybe break out that to even add it to a few darker beers to see where it wants to take those. Would be a good quality.
So we also recently
porter
got
stout.
This is another malt that we just recently acquired, which I don't think anybody else has. It's a version of this Red X. It's called Special X. So
I've been wondering about that.
It's kind of a roasted version of this. I tasted it. I haven't brewed with it yet, but it almost tastes like a coffee malt. some sort.
If this were, if you heated this up, I have a feeling this would have a lot of flavor quality. You know, like a dark Munich. That's just like, wow, there's a
lot of roast flavor in this.
Like a lot more pronounced flavor compared to, say, a dark Munich.
Which let me see if I can. Maybe I can look at this. I don't know if they consider that a base malt though.
The special red,
the special X, which it doesn't look like they do.
Typically, though, I mean, you're thinking about base malts. You're thinking of a pale malt. You know. It's kind of like you get into extract territory, and they're making those with base malts, but they're adding some sort of extra character to it. And a lot of times it's a little bit of Munich or whatever to get that extra lava bond color in there.
Yeah.
If it's a traditional dark, they're adding a lot extra to that, you know.
Okay, so this is the description here. Best Special X is a dark caramel malt that has been roasted only for a short time. As a result, it develops a very intense, exceptional flavor profile, adding max 20% to the grain bill. So that it's not a base grain like the Red X is. Leads to luminous chestnut red to chestnut brown color in a 12 Plato beer. Even when used in smaller amounts, the malt is ideally suited to supporting the overall body of dark beers, giving a more diverse and interesting taste. Best Special X is a fantastic malt variety that brewers looking for new ideas should take advantage of because of the diverse possibilities of the special malt. So it's kind of odd because it's it looks like it's used a translation program, so it's kind of odd, but interesting. Interesting.
Seem to have a whole line of different toasted varieties, and the whole line like we do with the Eric's.
Right. Now, man, you even pronounced it correctly.
I try and pay attention.
Is that what it is?
It's actually pronounced Eric's.
Yeah. All right. I've been wondering because I've heard it from y'all.
Most people call it Irex, but
that's what I heard it from y'all.
Yeah,
first.
exactly.
No, that's the way the Germans say it. When I was in Germany, Eric's. Yeah.
Eric's.
So,
Eric's.
Yeah. But anyhow, let's move on to what you have
Standard
here
base
for
malt.
standard base malt.
Okay, here's something to think about. Comparison between difference in brands of a standard base malt as we go through 3 different versions of malts that are out there right now. So, like, right here we have, let's just start with saying we have an American, let's say Breeze Pale Ale, a German, Eric's Pale Ale, a Belgian or Netherlands, really, Swan Ale, and then the English Muntons Pale Ale. All right, here's this many malts that you can get. Just to say any standard 2-row base pale ale without an extra amount of toasted character, say like a Maris Otter or a Golden Promise or something. A varietal. These are the ones that you're pretty much going to work with. Now, typically what you want to look for is like country of origin, and then knowing maybe based on the maltster itself, right? That's going to give you more character from those malts to know what you're looking for. Right.
And out of all of these that I've used, to be real honest with you, I think there's I guess I would be willing to say this, that, well, it's hard to explain, but I would say that American 2-row tastes completely different than European 2-row.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And for you guys out there that don't realize, 2-row is actually of European origin, whereas 6-row is domestic. And if you look, if we had a picture, I would show you guys, but I don't have that loaded up here. But 2-row basically has if you look at the stalk of the kernel, it actually has 2 rows of kernels. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. It has, 1 row and then 1 row on the other side, and it's 2-row, right? And then you have 6-row is a 6-row kernel that it actually has 6 rows of kernels on the stalk, right?
That's really interesting, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it's and if you look at it, 2-row is a little different than 6-row. 6-row has a lot higher diastatic power.
Yes, a lot.
Yeah, and diastatic power just means that And we can briefly go over the malting process. And the malting process is basically, and I mean, I think we can even go even further with that, is the reason that, if we go out and we just gathered up a bunch of barley in a field and we tried to make beer with it, we'd fail.
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason being is because if we try to do that, barley in its natural state is a complex carbohydrate or a complex sugar, right? Or a starch, some people call them. And so what we have to do is, we don't have to as homebrewers or even breweries, the maltsters actually take these and they start the germination process. They actually go in and they soak these grains in water for a day or two, and it actually starts the sprouting. You sprout it. Well, that starts an enzymatic process of starting to break those really complex sugars from complex sugars down to simple sugars. And why is that important? Well, yeast can only consume simple sugars, right? Mm-hmm. So the difference between 2-row and 6-row is that 6-row not only has enough enzymes to break down its own sugars, it has enough enzymes left over to break down other sugars like corn or rice or some other starch or even other less diastatic power grains that may require that. So, what you look at from a standpoint of 6-row, what I would say is mainly used by Bud Miller Coors at this point now. I don't think many. I wouldn't say most any craft breweries really use much 6-row. Would you say?
Craft?
Yeah,
no.
craft.
Yeah, it's the big boys.
It's the big boys that are using this, is because they use a lot of adjuncts to be able to. So they might throw in a corn or a rice or something in that, and they need those extra enzymes to be able to break down that cheap sugar.
Right. Yeah. It helps greatly for them.
Right.
It's more efficient.
So breaking that down, I think you also have to break down the difference in flavor profile. Whereas 2-row, you're going to get a more true malty sweetness that you get from the European 2-row.
You get more out of the actual malt, yeah.
Right. You get actual more true malt flavor. Whereas I would say the overall profile you would get from a 6-row is more of a graininess, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think the perfect example of this, go get you a can of Natty Light, man. I mean, to me, that is the most grainy beer on the planet. I mean, it just tastes like you just ripped off a stalk of 6-row and stuck in your mouth. I mean, it's just really grainy.
Yummy.
And I think that's kind of, so I think that's kind of the premise you got to look at when you're looking at base malts, is 2-row and 6-row. And I really, even for us now, it's hard for us to even get 6-row.
Right.
A lot of the maltsters are even
pretty much one brand.
A lot of people are moving away from it now. So.
And if you think about what's going on with the 2-row versions you can get based off the country of origin, you find some difference in flavor there, and then you get into the ones that, like you said, varietals and whatnot, and those can add, like, a Maris Otter is going to be a lot different in flavor than, say, a standard American 2-row. But when you get into just
pale ale,
you just get into just, like, say, the pale ale malts, like the Breeze Pale Ale, the IRX Pale, all those, they're aiming at a specific area. And with each one of them, though, you're still going to find some variance in flavor. But the good thing is that there's not enough variance necessarily to throw off a recipe.
Right.
Because with these, the best part about this is that if you find one that you're okay with and it's from the right maltster, I mean, like, for us, we've chosen to start using a lot of the IRX Pale Ale because it's a great 2-row as a base malt. It has a good flavor quality that matches basically any 2-row that you want to look for, and it's at a great price. Compared to, say, some of the others that we have coming in, in different categories. I mean, Breeze makes a 2-row. That's not the same thing as, say, a Breeze Pale Ale, because like they've malted it, they've kilned it differently.
Well, and I will say this, that for I've been brewing for I don't even say now. We're approaching 30 years.
He's old.
One of the things that I would say, though, is that the one thing that I used for forever was just a pure American 2-row.
Right.
And I think it's a great
Typically
base malt.
Breeze, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a great base malt. But one of the things that I started using years ago is I just started using a pale ale malt.
Right.
So there's a lot of things that people really get confused with brewer's malt, which, Breeze even used to call it a 2-row brewer's malt, and now they've just gotten rid of the 2-row moniker because they don't even make a 6-row anymore. Is that you get a lot more flavor profile from a pale ale malt.
Yes.
Because than what you get from a 2-row.
Yes.
Because, and this is really confusing. A lot of times people come in and they go, I want a 2-row pale malt. I'm like, okay, do you want a 2-row brewer's
which
malt?
one?
Or do you want a pale ale
Our question
malt?
is which one? What are you looking exactly?
Do you have a brand preference?
And for me,
because it does matter.
Yeah. It does matter. And I realized that I really like a pale ale malt better than I do a 2-row. And
I think it adds more flavor.
Yes,
yeah, it does.
I do too. And so what we've really noticed is we started using a lot of European pale ale malt, which I'm a huge fan of English style beers. So that's what a lot of these breweries are using over there. So. And I think that's really something you should, if you're not using some pale ale malts, try them, because I think you'll be pleasantly surprised, especially if you're doing IPAs or pale ales or something like that. You're going to notice a lot more of a more balanced flavor, I think, you would get from a pale ale malt, wouldn't you say?
I think there's more of a dryness to 2-row, like the Breeze or the Raw. They have flavor, they have character, but I think you find more actual character and something that's listed and labeled as a pale ale malt. And that's the point of all of these. It's like the Americans usually tend to be drier. The Belgians usually tend to have more maybe a toasted character to them. And the English tend to be more fully round, like over on a whole, if they seem to be more fully rounded in all flavor categories across the board. Like when, there's going to be some density and flavor to that one. Like I told them earlier, I haven't had a chance to use the Eric's, and I haven't had a chance to use the Swan yet. But I feel like they would have their own profile to add to something.
Yeah.
While being in the same range you want them to be, but I feel like they're going to add a little something extra in their own category, their own territory as far as where they came from. There's going to be something a little bit different than what you get from like a standard American pale ale or British.
Right.
So
and I would say this, and this is why I like it. I absolutely love it. So we carry a lot of different pale ale malts, and I really like the Eric's, and I like the Swan malts are fantastic. I love those too, and even the English pale ale malts. We have a few different ones. We've now become a wholesaler for Muntins, and I really like their pale ale malt. One of the things that I really noticed that even my American styles, I would recommend trying it, because a lot of people, if you're going to a brewery or something like that, this is where you as a home brewer can go outside the realm. You can kind of experiment and do stuff differently than what you would do as a pro brewery. Well, a pro brewery is going to use domestic stuff because, you know what? It's just cheaper
for them. Yeah.
It's cheaper for them, right? To me, however, I think you get a better flavor from a European 2-row. That's just me. And
I feel like there is more flavor quality.
Yeah, and I think you're able to, and I think this is a match made in heaven, is to using a European 2-row or a pale ale malt, or even a Maris Otter, or
if we come back to that, like that's definitely something. Maris Otter, That doesn't stand in the typical base malt category.
Right.
So,
but I'm just saying that I think those malts are a match made in heaven with American Pale Ales and IPAs, because it really does give you a well balanced beer, because you do still get a little more pronounced malt flavor that kind of balances out some of that hop bitterness.
right.
You know what I mean?
Like, okay, if you were to make a common recipe, Sierra Nevada, we suggest making that beer at home with, say, the Breeze 2-row, the RAR 2-row, just to find out how you feel about an American Pale Ale, or a 2-row, and then go on to the Pale Ale version to find out. And I think that even between the American versions and the British and continental versions, that you're going to find that there's a rounded character to a Pale Ale malt versus just a 2-row malt. I think that's always the case. There's a little bit more oomph behind those malts.
Oh yeah.
Just to give you a little bit. And I'm talking about like sort of like a smash beer.
Oh yeah.
Make a smash
sure.
beer with these and test out what you feel about them, because I think you're going to find something that might be the better base for a lot of what you work with. I feel like let's say you want an American 2-row, if you want to make something like Pliny the Elder.
Right.
But if you want to make a typical pale ale that has a nice supportive body with the right flavor character, but it's not overpowering and whatnot,
Right.
you want to use something that's closer to a pale ale malt, be it
Yeah.
American or European. European's probably going to have a
Right.
little bit more character than the
I
American
agree.
will.
I
So
agree.
that's what you're looking for when you look at pale ale or base malts
Well,
and
I think
whatnot, 2-row base malts.
I think basically what I would say, and I will just continue on that point that you made there, Greg, is basically complexity.
Yes, there's a large and more larger amount of complexity.
From your malt bill that you're going to get, and that's one of the things is, you know, when you're doing these pale ales and IPAs, really your malt bill is pretty simplified. I mean, you might have one caramel, maybe malt in there,
Right.
and then a base malt, and then you're accentuating the hop flavor and aroma. So you have to have something that will. And there's so many beers that I taste today, and I think it's gotten a lot better. But you go out there and you go, man, I just had this IPA or red IPA or whatever, and it's just like, holy crap, man! This all I taste is freaking bitter.
Right.
That's all it tastes. It's bitter as shit, and the more I drink of it, the bitter it gets. It's just, and I'm sitting here and I'm getting angry because I just recently had a beer that I tasted or bought a 20-ounce pour of, and I was really angry because about 10 ounces in, didn't want to drink any more of it because it was so bitter. But there wasn't anything else there. There was no malt flavor. There was no hop flavor or aroma. It was just like, man, it's bitter as hell. And it's red, you know. So
It's really unfortunate.
Very angry beer.
yeah, I was very angry about it because I didn't drink it all and I paid for it.
I mean, at least Arrogant Bastard says it on the label. We don't care if you like our beer. It's supposed to be
Well,
bitter.
even that beer has so much going on in it.
Yeah.
that,
Yeah,
you
but
know,
I mean, but there was no malt flavor there to balance that bitterness. It was just boom, it's in your freaking face, and it's just like, man, I don't care. And I think that's one thing that I get aggravated with people. A lot of times they go, "Oh man, this beer is hoppy," and I know this burns Brandon's ass too because
yeah.
that's not a good. Holy shit!
Wow.
You put a hole in the ceiling.
No, not this time. I
anyway.
really did not expect that to happen.
That was a Belgian beer being opened, by the way.
The cork just shot into the ceiling.
I just unwound it. I'm sorry.
But I think that's a moniker that's not a good, useful description of a beer. Is hoppy.
Right.
Now, what are you talking about? Are you talking about flavor, aroma, bitterness?
Yeah, and plus, how does it balance against that base malt that you're, like the base flavors of the malt that you're talking about? Because if it's a dry flavor, that hoppiness is going to come out so much more than it, and especially a bitterness is going to come out so much more. And that's, I mean, think about those things when you add these in,
Grab me a glass.
because you don't want to you just don't want to have to deal with that extra funk that comes from too much hop character and not enough malt character. It's too much. You know?
Right. Well, and I think that's basically, you know, what you got to look at is when you're, and I think a lot of people overlook this, is like, oh, I got the cool guy hops, as somebody says. I'm going to pack that shit full of it, and they don't really look at the overall. You know what I mean? They're not looking at the overall balance of the beer. They're looking at, oh, hey, I want to accentuate this hop, and who cares whatever else is in there. And I think that's something that you have to look at, and you've got to make sure you're making a well balanced beer.
Right.
Have good aroma, good flavor, as well as malt character.
And you have to have the balance first when you even want to tip the balance. Because a tipped balance is great, but you need to have the balance in the first place to get it to tip the right direction to make a better beer. And I think that's where the base malt, the concept comes in. And that's what comes from different brands, different countries of origin, you know,
shipping
all of
times
it.
Too.
We'll get back to the base malts of that too. But before we get
that's one thing though we were talking about a little bit. You know, even like a base malt like a Munich, a lot of guys use for pale ales or IPAs, which I think helps.
Yeah, it does, instead of, say, a caramel, which, and not to get too far into those because it's really easy to get lost in just base malt talk. Even though it's so simple, it's not, you know, is to go into, say, the crystal malt category. Crystal malt is similar to base malt in the fact that it's across the board the same concept. If you give it a number, it's say a crystal 60, a crystal 60. They should all be basically the same lava bond and whatnot that's added to the beer, color wise. But depending on the country of origin, it is a totally different flavor. Like if you were to take Brew 60, Eric's Crystal Teak 60, and Crisp Light Crystal 60,
completely
you have
different.
3 different flavors there, except for you have basically the same color coming out of them.
Right.
And that's the thing that goes with any crystal malt. It could be a 20, it could be a 10, across the board. But the concept there is like, I haven't tasted the Teak 60, but I've had the other 2. I've used them extensively. Right. You're going to find Brew 60 in probably 3/4 of American IPAs and whatnot. It's a very the Crystal 60 and 40 are so commonly used in American pale ales and IPAs. It's just across the board, like that standard.
Well, one of the things you're going to notice, and I always recommend people to do this, if you really are trying to hone in on a recipe, if you're trying to really just tweak a particular recipe, you're saying, hey man, you know, I got this beer, it's really freaking fantastic, I love it, and it's just not quite there, you know, it's not quite where I want it to be. And let's say you are using a Crystal 60 or a Breeze Caramel 60 or something like that, I would recommend you just ordering 3 or 4 different maltsters, different malt. And this is one of the things that kills me about a lot of other brew stores that are huge compared to us. But one of the things that what we do is we go, hey, we got 3 different Crystal 60s or 4 different Crystal 60s. Because to me, it is brand specific, makes a big difference.
They are all different.
And
they taste different. They feel different.
We don't have everything, but we try to have a good selection of different stuff. So, for example, try the Eric 60, the Munton 60, and then try the Breeze 60, and try them side by side, because there is a big, huge difference in the processes of way they make them in Europe versus they do in the United States. So
we'd like to keep it clean and dry.
Yeah, and
our stuff is sweetness and color and just a hint of flavor,
and it's not as consistent.
Exactly. There,
if you look at if you take a Breeze Crystal 60 and you take a British Crystal 60 and you look at them side by side, you would not even know they were the same malt.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you look at a Breeze Crystal 60, there's all these different variances and colors. There's some dark, there's some light. There's just like, it's like, ground beef and rice. I guess that's a good way to, look at it.
Now I'm hungry.
Right?
I think we've run into that with orders before.
But when you look at European malt, it's all this nice consistency and all the same color, and there's no like, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So they're drum roasted versus a bed roast type thing. So there's a lot more. You're going to get a lot more consistency out of a Crystal 60, and so or a British or a European 60. So one of the things I always tell people is this is really important when you're talking about crystal malts, because basically why are you putting crystal malts into your beer? Well, first off, I would say that you're using this to balance bitterness. You're using these sweeter malts to balance your beer.
Right.
Because these are all complex sugars or carbohydrates that are not going to be consumed for the most part.
Long chain.
So when you can buy these grains and you can pop them in your mouth and you taste them, chew them up and taste them, that's the flavor that's going to add to your beer. So if you taste those 2 or 3 different grains and you throw them in your mouth and you chew them up and you taste them, you're going to have a noticeable difference between this maltster, and this maltster. And it's going to have an effect on your overall taste of your beer.
Yes, definitely. Every time that it's one of those things where if you find a lot of fantastic American pale ales and you think it's all American, whatever, you're going to end up finding a lot of times that they use an English malt in it to give you that rounded character that really just blew it out there compared to, say, something else that felt a little thin and held back, Again, it's that dryness and like restrained character versus very expressive versions of whatever. And I think that's what you get with the English ones is they're very expressive.
All their beers are so malt forward.
Yes, and they're so expressive of a variety of flavor characteristics. And that's what we'd find, like, say, all right, the Crystal 60 here, it's meant to give you a mild, it's not a red tone. It's a amber, maybe about that point you're starting to hit amber. It's dry 60, in flavor, but like sweet, just the hint of sweetness is starting to come in with a little flavor versus, say, a 40, 20, or 10, which is giving you just more like sweetness and less anything else. But you're not a 120 where you're getting like a raisin character, an 80 raisiny, like dark fruit. And then there's the Irex or the crisp, and I think there's a difference between those two because I feel like the German version has more flavor character, but not as much as, say, the English does. I feel like the English crystal malts still blow everybody else out of the water with what they're throwing out there.
Well, and I would be willing to say this, that most people, if you substituted German pale ale and American pale ale malt, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. And it's very substitutable. Maybe some nuances that are a little different, but for the most part, we have, and for you guys that out there don't know, we have a small distribution company that we sell directly to breweries, and we have a lot of people that went in and are using the Irex pale ale and Pilsner malt and haven't missed a beat. As a matter of fact, they've had better flavor, better everything across the board from the malt that they were using previously. So I can't really say that I would say there's a huge difference. I think their specialty malts are way different than what, but their base malts I would say were pretty comparable to, if not a little better than domestic stuff. You know what I mean? So we've had really good luck with that as far as that's concerned.
What do you feel about like the Crystal Teak versus, say, a British Crystal Light 60? Because the Light 60 is definitely, when they say light, they're meaning it's more towards, say, an
well,
American.
You know what I would say? I would say the German crystal malts from at least from Eric's. What I would say they're somewhere in between an American crystal malt and a English crystal malt. So
okay, that makes sense.
They're not as
they're not restrained, but
but they're not over the top like an English.
They're
malt.
not blossomed with it. It's not flooding out with flavor. And
yeah, so I would say they were. I would say that they're somewhere in between. They're not like. I think they're more pronounced than American crystal malt, but I don't think they're as distinct. I guess would be the best way to say is a English crystal malt.
Because I feel like the English, the English 60, even though it says light, still probably delivers a little more color than say American would. And I kind of wonder if it beats out the other two. In the Eric's and the Brees. In this situation, I feel like if you put them all together, you're going to see a little bit of difference.
Well, and I would say this too, and this is kind of a misnomer.
It's just so much more dense.
This is one thing that I would say is kind of a misnomer, because if you look at like American crystal malts, a lot of times they say, oh, it's crystal 10, 20, 40, 60, 80, 90, 120, right? But I can promise you they're not all 10, 20, 40, 60, 80, 90, 120. They're in a ballpark range.
Plus or minus 5-ish.
Right. And so, yeah. Or 10-ish or 20-ish.
Versus the British or whatever that's...
Well, they actually give you a range, though.
Right,
and I've noticed a lot more variances in domestic crystal than I have in European crystal. But... and I think a lot of that has to do with the process that they make it, because a caramel malt's made a little different than a crystal malt. So,
right.
So I think that basically...
Though they're labeled the same.
Yeah, well,
typically they're always labeled the same.
So
crystal caramel, same thing as far as
something
recipe.
to look into on your own to.
So
really
basically, from what I understand, is like domestic crystal malts
same.
or domestic caramel malts are put in a big bed, and they roast them, and they kind of turn them over in this big. They may have like a screen, and they're turning them over.
Vibration.
In this big screen. Whereas in the English crystal malts or European, they actually put them in a roaster or a drum, and they
do with coffee.
Yeah, exactly like they do coffee, and they're rotating them over so that they get a more uniform caramelization than what you would get from just in a bed. Does that make sense?
Which makes sense when you look at the actual malt. If you have a mill at home, you're ordering them whole. Just look at them and taste them, because you're going to see it. And I could say like the light, when you look at the light, when you talk about an English, it does actually look a little lighter than, say, one that they call the dark. The darks are dark, and you're not talking about a big variance between a 60 and an 80 in the long run. So
you can tell when they're right next to each other that they're a different color, but if you mix them together, you couldn't tell that there was two things mixed together.
Right. And that's, I can think about if you milled an English 60 or 80 and you milled an American 60 or 80, the color difference is vastly different.
Yeah.
But they still tend to turn out about the same thing in your beer. But the flavor is very much different. So,
and I guess the biggest point I would try to make on this whole conversation that we're having is, and I really... I guess I get really frustrated with home brewers a lot of times, because they come in and they go, oh, I got this recipe, I got it off.
I want 6 pounds of 120.
Yeah, well, not even so much that. It's just I want Brees 120, and I'm like, okay, well, we have. Oh, you want Crystal 120? What do you want? You want Brees 120? You want Crystal 120?
I don't know. I want 120.
120, and they only go with that brand specific. Malt that whatever
from
that
the
recipe.
yeah.
And I'm just like, man, there's a lot more things out there to try and experiment with, and
hard
I think
to ask someone who's excited if they know the difference.
Well,
because you don't want to discourage them.
That's true. I would say that's true. Is I think most homebrewers, and I was like this for a long time. Is I was like, oh, I want to brew an alt beer. Oh, I want to brew a Pilsner. I want to brew a quad. I want to brew, and I wouldn't try to refine that recipe.
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to just try experimentation with all these different styles, and then after I kind of settled down and decided, hey, these are the styles I really want to make. These are the beers I want to make. I want to refine my style of this particular beer. Let me experiment with different malts to make that same beer and see which one I like the best. You know, I mean, and I think that even more important. Like I love Belgian beer styles. I think that's even more important in that regard. You know, is to try, because those are malt forward styles. You really need to experiment with malt more so than what you would with even hop forward styles. So.
Well, honestly, that leads us into, I mean, there's a lot still to cover in these ranges in which we need to come back to it, but what you just said brings us into the next category, the toasted and roasted, where here, this is more or less of, actually less of a comparison between, say, brands. This gets into that style range of, if you're picking one of these malts, it's like one of the only ones. The different companies don't make, not every company makes this brand or this brown malt or this Victory or whatever. Like there may be a couple of brands out there, but there aren't a ton of them. You know what I'm saying? It would be like saying, like, you know, how many people make, they don't make that many smoke malts or whatever else. But they kind of stand alone in what their own character it is when you add it into what you're doing. Here, we want to talk about the Thomas Fawcett Brown Malt, the Brees Victory, the Thomas Fawcett Pale Chocolate, and the Swan Coffee Malt. Four very different things. These are not to be compared against each other. Just remember that, because they're not the same thing in any way. Good. Versus, say, like the 60s and the crystal malts or the base malts. Like you're talking about a malt that's meant to give you a specific flavor range and color range. Victory is another one that's again not really going to give you color, but it's going to give you a lot of flavor. The Thomas Fawcett Pale Chocolate, this is one that's a favorite, I think, for a lot of us.
I love that beer
because
I love that beer.
This is
that malt.
Color, it's color, but man, the flavor character for what it gives is so
people
specific.
Get that one confused a lot. For
it is
things.
So specific for what it needs to be.
And there's that guy named Jamil. He really likes that.
And then there's the Swan Coffee, which stands on its own for what it is. I mean, there are not that many maltsters that make a coffee malt that's specific to be what it is. I mean, let's just start with the brown, though. Thomas Fawcett Brown Malt. This is one that we actually use regularly in our Rapture kits.
Yeah.
And I really honestly think that Rapture kit would not have the flavor that it has without this malt. And for a long time, this was used historically, say, in
porter.
An English porter, you know. Not a brown ale, but a porter, you know. It adds a character that's just this...
it's meant to be a little bit complex.
Described from Thomas Fawcett. Brown malt's a darker form of pale malt. It's typically used in brown ale, porter, stout. It will add a nutty, biscuity, and slightly smoky flavor in addition to the roastiness. And if you taste this, you're not really getting a lot of roastiness or smoky. But when you taste it, you get exactly what they just described.
You get, in my opinion here, you get the just right browned biscuit roasty flavor.
It's like it's what a brown ale
golden
should taste
brown like it should be.
Yeah.
Well, you know what they say traditionally, that brown malt was used 100% as a porter. Don't try that now. It's different.
No.
It's not. It's not the same brown malt they used to use.
Thomas Fawcett's the only one that makes this, I think, right?
No, Muntins makes one.
Muntins makes one? Okay. Yeah. But we're going to have that eventually. We haven't had that before, and I haven't tried that one.
Yeah,
so
we're going to have the full lineup of Muntins actually Friday.
But think about 66 to 78 Lava Bond. It's pretty dark.
Yeah, it's pretty dark.
But it's still that amber ruby kind of dark versus a very black opaque.
It's not a coffee dark.
But it's in that range.
is
of
in the
like
range.
a coffee malt range, but not coffee.
Yeah.
And that's the best thing about this one is like it. Honestly, the brown malt to me stands apart from so many other specialties that we have for what it tastes like, because there's so much flavor and it takes so little to really impart that flavor, really, you know. But you can add a lot of it still. When I'm not saying a lot like in multiple pounds, but you can add a lot more than a typical specialty and still be restrained for what it gives you. So Stubby's laughing. I don't know.
No, I was just saying that we're having a hard time getting the comments from Facebook tonight. I just realized there's a bunch of them that I didn't receive tonight. So
sorry, guys.
Yes, I just went through and I was like, oh, that would.
Well, there are three of us here to not.
Yeah,
I turned my phone off. I was down to 11%.
But like brown malt, though, Stubby. What would you say as far as like this one on its own?
What I use it for?
I mean, in a general sense, like when it stands apart from the others, I feel like it's specific to what you want to use. And
I think you have to be careful with it. I think that it can be overpowering in a hurry. To me, it can be, if you overuse it, it can be acrid. I've overused it and had.
You're right. Yeah, the acrid part.
I mean, not to the point of like chocolate malt or something like that, but you can use more of it than what you would want to use for a chocolate malt. But if you overdo it with brown malt, it can be acrid.
Like if you wanted to make a brown porter, which is sort of abnormal as a style, but I think this flavor character is fantastic.
Yeah, I do too.
Like that,
I even use it in my American brown. I like it in that.
Yeah.
I use it in porters. It may even be. You might can even use it to accentuate stouts, but I mean a small amount. I think it's got a really good flavor. I would say it's more of a toasty flavor. It is a toasted malt, not necessarily like a roast, but I would say that also it's on the high end of the toasted malts. Whereas you got. So you can kind of get that biscuity, nutty flavor from brown malt. So a lot of like nut brown ales will use brown malt. That's where you get that nuttiness, or you might be able to get that from something like a Victory or a Special Roast. So it's kind of all in that same regard, you know. I like brown malt, but I think you have to be really careful with it because
that makes sense
to me. Every time I've ever used it or started to experiment with it, one of the things that I've found is that you can overdo it in a hurry in real quickly.
In the wrong range.
Yeah.
Because I feel like you can use more of it than you normally would in some.
It's a very powerful
additions
malt.
But, yeah.
It can impart a lot of flavor with a little bit of it.
But it has to be in the right beer.
Yes, it does. It has to be in the right beer. I think browns and porters and stuff of that nature, maybe even some stouts, it might work.
Right.
So,
don't use it in a pale ale. It's bad.
No, absolutely.
You know what?
It won't be a pale ale.
Well, you can kind of
quickly.
We didn't really cover that much, but the amber malt, which is kind of a lighter brown malt,
right?
You can use in IPAs.
Of course.
As a matter of fact, Dogfish Head really uses a lot of that Thomas Fawcett amber malt. Rather than crystal malt. So, and here's the thing that you're going to get from the amber or the brown malts. You're going to get more of that toasty. You're not going to get any like caramel flavor or sweetness. So that's kind of what you got to kind of
getting
look at.
Flavor over the other. Yeah.
It's more of the toasty, biscuity flavor than you're going to get from a crystal malt, which actually imparts some caramel flavors.
Right.
You know? So.
And to bring on, like, to go from that and spring off of the concept of toasty and biscuity, we can talk about the Breeze Victory. 28 Lava Bond. This is very light overall as far as when you're adding it. I've always noticed it to be, like, just barely, I mean, if you're adding it in, you can see the color, but it's just a very light version of... Because typically you're seeing a Victory added to, say, a Pale Ale or maybe an IPA or something like that. Or it's added in under the background of a darker beer to give a specific flavor character. Exceptional malt delivers truly unique, biscuity, nutty flavors with the distinctive and comforting aroma of baked bread. Baking
That's where
bread.
I really get it right there. It's
Comforting aroma of baked bread.
flavor.
Victory malt's awesome in nut brown ales and other dark beers. It adds smooth, complex flavor and aroma to any beer.
That baked bread flavor I get with Victory more than anything else.
Yes, Victory is all about that. I think that
I think it's awesome.
honestly, if you like that, it could be added to almost any style that can support it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like Victory shows up in a lot of pale ales. It shows up in a lot of stouts and porters and brown ales and the obvious beers, but the outside of it is the lighter beers. It shows up in a lot of those beers because people really like that flavor, I think.
Mm-hmm.
This is like, I'm not talking about like lighter, necessarily Belgian beers or something, but even there, it can work if it's in the right beer with the right other components that are added to it. Victory and Biscuit, more or less the same thing. Like Dingman's has a biscuit, Breeze has a Victory.
They're close.
They're very much
on the raw grain flavor.
Yeah, the same range, and that's one of those things. It's like, especially there's one of those brand things that go across the board. But like if you're really looking for that flavor character, it's there. But don't overdo it.
No,
because you can definitely overdo it.
Yes,
it needs to be a very light. You get the flavor, but you don't want it to be the entire flavor. You want it to be a hint. A prelude to some other flavor.
Right. And that's the thing that, like, I've used Victory in multiple brews, but mine has always been a very minor addition, and I've been like hesitant because I can taste it in like a pale ale, like an American pale ale.
To me, the perfect place to use Victory, American Amber Ale.
Yeah,
bar none. That's where it
good.
needs to be.
Yeah. So I haven't made enough of ambers to know. So.
American Amber Ale that's kind of personifies where that malt should be used, in my opinion.
I just want to play with it in a porter setting because to me porters feel like
it depends if you want to do
long wet day.
Yeah, it depends if you want to do a brown porter or a robust porter, because I think there's a big difference. So,
yeah, there is, and I think a brown porter setting would be a better place for it. In that, a brown porter feels like you've had a long day. It's been cold outside. It's been wet outside. You want something that's going to warm you up like soup.
Well, like I think Victory has that more. I don't know.
Toasty, biscuity.
Well, it's that, but it's like a. I'm trying to think the right way to describe that. It's like a.
It doesn't make us hungry.
It's a gentle flavor that you don't want to have like too much of.
I was going to use that reference from Billy Madison. Today, Junior.
Yeah, that happens.
That's probably politically
especially
incorrect now though.
The people are.
Why are you looking at me, Swan?
It's a fragile flavor that you don't want to break, and you don't want to have overpowered. Because it's very easy to be one or the other.
Something else flavor.
Like you either don't get it, or you can definitely easily dive into too much.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing that I find with Victory. So, whereas the next one, Pale Chocolate, with a lava bond of 200 to 260,
very easy to overdo.
It's
super easy to overdo.
It can be, but it's still, out of all of the dark malts, this one actually to me tastes the most like an actual milk chocolate or something. And if you want something chocolate, use Pale Chocolate.
Yes.
Don't use regular chocolate. Don't use any other chocolate. Use Pale Chocolate.
Pale
this
chocolate
is the one
like
that
chocolate.
Makes it work.
Tastes like chocolate as we know of as chocolate.
Exactly, and it's so amazing. If this didn't exist, there would be so many beers that just don't work quite right. Like the way that they want them to.
This is a relatively new malt, actually.
Exactly.
And one of the things I would say though is that especially from a beginner standpoint, one of the things I always hear is people come in and they go, man, Stubby, I'm going to make me a chocolate porter. Cool. I want 5 pounds of chocolate malt. I'm like, no, you don't. You really, really don't want 5 pounds of chocolate malt.
You do not.
And the reason being is I think a lot of people think of
it's going to taste horrible.
Is chocolate malt is that it is chocolate flavor. And
no.
I hate to say that.
I
hate to say this, but
it's burnt coffee.
No, yeah. I was talking with what was it? We did an interview with golly. Oh man, it was at NHC in Grand Rapids. We did the interview with Mosier, yeah. And we were talking to him about chocolate malt, and he said that bar none, the harshest beer you can put in your beer is chocolate malt. And I really took that to heart because I started looking at it, and I was like, you know what? He's right. You could put a shit ton of roasted barley, and it's not going to give you that as much acrid flavor is what
an actual chocolate
malt is like the chocolate malt is.
I think,
and so a lot of times when people are saying, "Hey, I want a lot of chocolate flavor. I want to put a lot of chocolate malt," all you really get from that is harshness or acrid or burnt flavors. And so what you have to think of is that if you want a chocolate beer, you got to put chocolate in it, dude. You know, it's not you're gonna get from chocolate malt in small amounts. You might get some chocolate nuances,
or nuances,
or roasted barley. You're gonna get coffee nuances, but
or very dark chocolate.
Yeah, if you want coffee flavors, you got to put freaking coffee in it. You know, it's the same thing with chocolate. If you want chocolate flavors, you got to put chocolate. I mean, these are overtones or undertones, I guess is what you would say. Is when you're using chocolate malt or coffee malt for that matter, is these are just just nuances. They're not like a major flavor component.
Right.
It may be like, oh yeah, when you're tasting a wine, you're like, oh, I get notes of pear and whatever. Now, that's what those malts are going to contribute.
Right.
It's not going to be like, boom, this tastes like a chocolate coffee beer because you put a shitload of chocolate malt and coffee malt in it. Because that's going to taste like ass.
Yes. Yes, it will.
I know what
you know what I mean?
But with the pale chocolate, though, you get you
get more true.
It's a get out of jail
notes.
card on this one.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, it is, and it's if replace a portion of anything that you're thinking about, like if it's asking for a pound of chocolate in something, put half a pound to 3/4 of a pound of that in pale. And then the other quarter and chocolate, and you will find a vast difference in that chocolate flavor.
Yeah, and you
especially
know what?
if you add nibs in it at some point,
oh my God,
cocoa nibs.
Yeah.
I really like this malt. I'm not gonna lie. I really do. I use it a lot. As a matter of fact, I substitute most of my chocolate malt, not all of it. In my recipes, a lot of times I'll substitute out chocolate for that.
It will affect your color. But the flavor profile, my God, so much better.
Most of the beers that I'm using it's not going to make that big a difference anyway. If I use 75% pale chocolate versus, I mean, it's dark as dark. It's going to be a dark beer. You know what I mean? It's not that big a deal.
It's not as dark as, say, a true chocolate or roast.
It's about 100 Bourbon less, or
don't use this if you want like a stout that isn't really chocolatey. You want it to be bitter and dark and like that roasted character. Don't use it for that, but use it for anything that you really want the chocolate to. Mm-hmm. This is truly the chocolate of chocolate malts,
right? and I hate, and I mean, this is not a bash on this, but I'm not a fan of Carafa. Because Carafa to me,
not the same thing.
Carafa to me is that's German chocolate malt-esque.
That's weird flavor
to me. If you get too much of this, it's a weird flavor.
It's dark. The darkness is intense, but the flavor is so strange.
Yeah, it really is. If you overuse Carafa,
I don't know how to describe
it's
Carafa.
Weird. To me, it just tastes weird. If you overuse it,
it's there. It stands out.
And I mean, if you overuse Carafa and you hand me a beer, I'm going to know exactly what you use. I'm like, man, too much Carafa.
Which has like been a black IPA thing, which is sort of the roasted thing, which stands out more versus chocolate. But man, if a porter with pale chocolate instead of Carafa or a roasted or too much chocolate or even a stout, especially if you want a stout that gets into what they're calling the pastry stout range, if you really want the chocolate, you need to use this for. Oh my God! You need to use this first, and that's where you're really going to get into that
shit. That stuff's dangerous.
It's kind of like the Swan coffee. It's not truly coffee, but like a nutty, creamy taste is what they're going with, the coffee flavor. A lot of the coffee malts, when you taste them, they're not exactly coffee, but just the right amount actually does lead into that coffee flavor, especially if you back it up with the right roasted malts, like the chocolate or the pale chocolate, and you know.
Here's kind of the way I would say coffee malt. Okay, chocolate malt is to pale chocolate as roasted barley is to coffee malt. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Because I mean, coffee malt's a little less roasted barley, but if you overuse that, it's going to be the same thing as chocolate malt. It's going to be
too
freaking
much
in your face. And I think
coffee malt's easily overused.
Yeah, well, and I think I see all the time. It's unbelievable the amount of roasted malts I see a lot of times in people in stouts and stuff.
Right.
Jesus Christ, man, this is going to
taste
off. Terrible.
Yeah, back off.
I mean, to me, you can really overdo, and I think most home brewers overdo roast malts because to me, I don't want to taste something that tastes like you're licking an ashtray, dude.
Yeah.
Well, you need the color, right?
Shit.
You need the color.
You need the color, but damn.
If it's an imperial stout, you need the color.
I
but
mean, when you get the 500 Lovabond, it don't need to be any darker, dude.
Well, no, I know that's what I'm saying. What do you build it with, though? You add the color in off of some of these roasted malts, but like you build like a lot of the flavor profile with the lighter malts, like the crystals and the Munichs and all that.
For sure.
A little bit of coffee, maybe the little bit water pale, and then you add in the roast and the extra chocolate and whatnot. That's
to me. There's not a. I mean, I love stouts. I mean, and you guys know this. I mean, man, I love a lot of different stouts this time of year, but.
Especially when they're big.
Yeah, I like the big
beefy
stouts, man. I love imperial stouts. Beefy. I like, all these winter stouts that come out this time of year. But nothing turns me off worse than having an overly bitter, acrid stout. I'm out. I don't like it.
Yeah.
And we like Stubby to be turned on, so.
That's right.
I'm just saying that from a standpoint, there's a lot of imperial stouts that are pretty intense, but to me, I really want that roast to be balanced, man. I don't want it to be burnt.
You don't want burnt toast.
I don't want burnt. I mean, that's my thing.
And if you add Carafa to the existing sort of,
then you have burnt weirdness,
overdone burnt. Oh my God, it's a weird. It's like tangy burnt.
Yeah, it's tangy burnt. It's weird.
It's so weird. I've never understood. It was like, no, I don't want it. And I can't think. I don't know what. I guess Cinnabar is not supposed to have a flavor, but that's another one that they throw in a lot of times. It's a color profile.
Yeah, right.
Make it as dark as possible. Yeah, Cinnamar. Yeah. So as dark as it can possibly be.
Right. So, well, it's just, man, those things, I think that's one of the things that, and I preach on this nonstop about homebrew. Less is more. I mean, really, less is more. And my God, I have guys come in, and it's like, Jesus, I want 12 freaking malts in this beer. No, you don't, man. Just chill. When you add that many malts, all your beer is going to taste like is freaking mud.
Right.
Because you can't differentiate, and most of you guys surely don't have, enough palate education to be able to pick out each one of those little nuances.
Yeah, we're not talking about you
mud.
Can, yeah, but because some of you can, but that's definitely the answer. Is that the more that you add, the less that it matters.
Dude, well, and that's the thing. I think I have a pretty sophisticated palate, but I don't like to taste all that shit. I mean, most of the time, the beers that I like are pretty simple. They might have one or two. I mean, they might accentuate a particular hop or a particular malt or something like that. But I don't want all that.
Or
crap
support
in
some
there.
other addition too. That's
I mean, most of the beers that I think are the best beers out there are pretty simple recipes. I mean, they're 2 or 3 malts, or 1 or 2 malts, or even single malt.
Right. Something that just occurred to me, looking at just the 4 toasted and roasted that I listed here, with the brown malt, the Victory, the chocolate, and the coffee, you could take these 4 things and make variations of porters, stouts, and brown ales. All of you can make variations of all of them with all 4 of these in minor amounts that might blow your mind based off how much you add on each one.
Absolutely.
But they will make, that's 4 different things added into the stout, porter, or brown ale.
You bet.
Or even if you wanted to go into the probably the IPA territory of adding a hoppiness to it, as long as it rounds out with what you just made a flavor character of maltiness to, because this is all about maltiness. This is so much malty character to it versus the standard crystal and base malt added together. So, I mean, think about that. That's really what it is. There's so much to work with on one side before you even add any hops to it or any other flavor profile character to it.
Yeah.
And even those too, they all lend themselves to adding flavors to.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a good point, Greg. And one of the things that I think is really what you got to look at when you're formulating recipes, which we found time and again is a really popular topic, is that you have to look at how do you accentuate your beer, not necessarily overpower your beer.
A lot of people do.
You're using these malts to accentuate the flavor, not. I want to say contribute to the flavor. I don't want to say. I wouldn't want to say. I guess the best point I'm trying to make with this is you're not trying to. When you're making these beers, you don't want to say, "Oh man, this beer has Victory malt in it." I don't think that's what you're trying to go for. I think you're kind of go, "Oh wow, this has a little nutty flavor to this brown ale." I mean, this is fantastic. I don't want you to think. And this is one malt that drives me crazy. People use a shit ton of it. Is melanoidin. Anytime somebody uses melanoidin, I'm like, holy crap, this tastes like melanoidin malt. Don't use it. Back off on it. So it's all a perfect balancing act. And I always get into this when we're teaching classes, especially with newbies. And I'm going, okay, look at it this way. All right, dude. So you've got yeast, you've got malt, you've got hops, and you also have some water elements there. But you've got hundreds of different malt choices. You've got hundreds of different yeast choices. You got hundreds of different malt or hop choices. What makes a good beer is how you balance all of those different nuances together. Because some yeast profiles have more esters and is that you dropping all that shit over there? I hear it.
Full of money.
See, USS Los Angeles above us.
But I hear,
58 cents.
But it's one of those things that I think it's a perfect balancing act. You got to be able to, and you got to realize what kind of beer you're making too, because, okay, if you're making a Hefeweizen, well, you don't want to put a shit ton of hops in there because you're accentuating the ester profile that particular yeast makes.
Right.
Okay, well, I'm making an IPA. Yeah, I want to accentuate the hops. I want those hops to come to the forefront, but you also have to have a backbone. You also have to have something, a malt bill that's going to support that
Right.
that hop. Does that make sense?
And you don't want
Absolutely.
the wrong thing in there. It's like everything that we talked about tonight. If you said Hefeweizen, no.
Right.
None of what we gave you. I dare you to go ahead and add it. If you did and you make something good,
You might make it. You
good
could
on
do-
you.
yeah.
Like a dark Hefeweizen.
Yeah,
That's not a
Dunkelweizen.
That's not a Dunkelweizen, but like it's very roasty or chocolatey.
Yeah.
You know, it's like chocolate and banana. I mean, those kind of
sounds
things come out of
wonderful,
it when you
actually.
do pale chocolate. All of that comes out of it, but you're still going to have to be very restrained. So,
I'm going to try this now.
and probably add a little bit of
thought of
extra flavor character from something else. So, you know, that's as far as Malt-o-Rama goes. There's so much to really talk about. Like, obviously, it's really easy to go in a lot of directions on these.
Yeah, way off the rails.
I think that like we have more of that in the future that we want to cover because we've had discussions about that with some of our listeners to say, hey, you
Right.
know, I want to hear more about different versions of things, and like it's the same with hops. Well, how can I use this? Where
Right.
what does this give me, and where did it come from, and that kind of thing.
Well, I think ultimately, and I think this is what we can boil it down to, Greg, is that, you know, I think one of the most intriguing parts of that we've learned from doing this podcast and as us as homebrewers is that how do we make better beer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of that is how can we eliminate the learning curve for you? And one of the reasons, one of the things that I could say that we can help with in that regard is, hey, let's talk about what we know about these particular malts so you can make an educated decision when you're putting
Yes.
these beers together, right?
that's the goal. Yeah.
So if we told you some stuff about pale chocolate, you might go, hey, man, you know what? Next time I use something, I'm doing and this is one of the things I would say that would help you. Hey, you want to make a chocolate stout or a porter?
A true chocolate.
A true chocolate.
Yeah.
You're using some cocoa nibs or and you want to make well, maybe add more pale chocolate than you would regular chocolate.
Yes.
Absolutely.
This will give you even more chocolate notes to add to those cocoa nibs that you're adding to that. So you're trying to support that chocolate flavor in that particular chocolate beer, right?
Yes.
So those are things that you gotta look at when you're formulating recipes, and I think these are things that we can help you with by using our experience and knowledge of these particular malts, and be able to help you expand your knowledge and maybe give you a little bit better educated guess when you are formulating your own recipes. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and that's the whole point, because a lot of times we have a lot of people that walk in and they ask us a question about whatever. We see a recipe and they ask us something and like, well, why do I change that? And we tell them, well, you have 2 pounds of chocolate and what you're asking me for is something that does need that pale chocolate instead. Or it does not just that, but you also need to add the nibs in or whatever. And I will say the CACAO word, however the hell you pronounce that damn word.
Is it cocoa? Cocoa?
Cacao, whatever.
Cacao.
I don't
Cocoa nibs.
honestly. I don't care anymore. Just that stupid
Cocoa nibs.
Yeah.
And
They're nibs.
it adds flavor. It doesn't add color and things like that. It's one of those things where like we know that this is there, and we ask you these questions to say, base malt does this, hops do that, and other additions do that, and that's what we want to know what you're looking for, because you're going to get the best thing out of those things. Because seriously, most brewers that we've met that haven't been brewing for a while, they have no idea what pale chocolate is, and when we give it to them, they're like, "Oh, hell yes!
Yeah,
I
for
found
sure.
I found the answer to what I was looking for." You know. And
Yeah,
if it's
for
not
sure.
that, it's one of the other
like a
specialty
tablet
malts that's
from
very
God.
much more rare, that they expect it from these other older recipes, and they're not getting that. So, but either way, that's why we're doing this. That's
Yeah.
the whole point. We're going to keep doing it and try to give you more and
Insight. Well, I mean that's the thing. Even here's honest to God, one of the greatest insights I guess from working at a store or at our place is that I guess really one of the things that I've learned working with pro brewers a lot in recipe formulation is that pro brewers get into a rote, I guess you would say,
Rut?
Yeah, rut or rote. And like they repeat stuff over and over and over, right? They brew the same stuff. They brew the same beer over and over and over a lot, right. and they're familiar with certain maltsters or products, right? So one of the things that I've learned is that pro brewer, and this is not a knock on pro brewers, is that they don't know product, and they may know about the cool guy hops, or they might know about the hottest thing going, but they really don't have an idea of all of the different things that are available to them. So that's one of the things that we've really been able to help a lot of like small craft breweries is, hey man, try this, or do this, or because we do know our product here, and that's one of the things that
first taste is free.
Yeah, well, and that's one of the things that we've really had to, and that's what I told a lot of the guys that are pro brewers that are on staff now. Is like, hey, you guys think you know product, but wait till you work here. Then you're going to learn a lot of stuff about
you're right,
the ingredients and products and stuff like that you never knew that even existed. And to me, that's one of the greatest things about doing what we're doing. Is you're broadening your horizon outside of your normal, typical, your repertoire of malts that you may not know about.
Here it's not limited at all.
And to me, I think more people think about, hops. Well, shit, most of them, honestly, there's about 20 or 30 hops you could probably get by with and get all the same profiles that you're looking for.
Yep.
Even though, there's this one and this one and this one does that and this. Come on. I mean, really, there's a lot of them you could probably get by with and never know the damn difference. So,
or a combination of.
Yeah, a combination
which is something you also learn while you're sitting here doing the thing that we
absolutely.
So, but anyhow, I really enjoyed this talk tonight because I think it's really imperative and very educational to learning about how to formulate your own recipes. And I think these are some of the things that I didn't know when I was trying to do my own first recipes. I didn't know what the hell a malt tasted like or contributed to my beer. So I think there's a really important. Damn you and that Christmas St. Bernardus beer.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
We're not importing anything.
Yeah. So anyway, I'd just like to say, let's go ahead and close this dude up. In future episodes, we'll revisit some new fermenters yeast selection with Kevin Lean.
Couple of weeks. Yeah.
Cover a few more listener requests and more. So keep listening. Again, please be sure to check out our Patreon account at patreon.com/ComeAndBrewItRadio to help support the show. We have two $5, $10, and $20 options because every little bit counts. Plus, we want to reward you while you can help keep the show going, get involved, and improve it. Just let you know, though, however, we still do have some of those kick-ass brewing shirts that Greg is wearing right now. Show them, Greg.
Very nice.
Boom, 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 boom.
Show it.
Look at that.
Show it.
Damn.
Yeah.
So if you want to become a $10 or a $20 patron, we will definitely get you one of these shirts.
I'm wearing one that's a little
soon.
bit too big for me. Sorry.
Yeah, I know. You told us to get you the double.
I know.
But
I lost some weight.
Did you? Okay. Well, I didn't know because you were wearing a tent. But
normally that's what I wear. So that's my thing. That's my thing, man. Leave me alone.
All right. Thanks again for listening to Come and Brew It Radio. But be sure to share with your friends on social media. I said it right?
Yes.
Social media.
Give us some ratings on iTunes and Stitcher, and to send any ideas or comments to info@texasbrewinginc.com. Also, you can check out in on our brew days of the guys at their Brew
Focused.
Fuck us.
Brew Focus.
Fuck us.
Holy crap, man. I'm like totally screwing this up. Facebook pages at Brew with Stubby, at Brew with Brando, at Brew with Mikey B, at Brew with Pete, at Brew with Chris, and at Brew with Greg.
Yeah, we're going to try to add some more stuff soon, I'm sure, because everybody's
thanks, guys, for listening to us babble and all that good stuff. But
cheers.
Until next time.
I have 17 people that watch me brew. I am super excited personally.
Well, tell them to come and brew it.
Come and brew it.
Cheers, y'all. Thanks.
Holy shit, dude. That was do you realize how long an episode that was?
Like 4 hours?
Almost 3 hours.
Really?
Yeah.
Damn.
2 hours and 45 minutes.
Good episode.
And Brandon wasn't even here.
Yeah.
Could have been 5 hours.
Could you use the brown malt to make a good Potter's beer?
This episode 104, right?
Like a little bit.
Episode 104?
104.
Yeah, 104.